Hey there, it's Sam, making this quick astrology update here from San Ramon, California. My guru's ashram here. Beautiful landscape. Let you take a look at that first. I'm going to be talking about Mercury Retrograde that's coming up. A Mercury Retrograde cycle that's starting on June 8th. And it runs from June 8th until July 2nd. And it's going to be in Gemini. So Mercury will be retrograde in Gemini. Now, of course, we have the whole, the whole kind of stigma that's attached to Mercury retrograde. And of course, it does have a certain quality of it that you need to be aware of. So when planets go retrograde, first of all, they're closer to the Earth than at any other time. And so as they're closer to the Earth, they appear to be moving backwards, just like when two cars that are moving at a different speed get next to each other. One appears to be moving backwards. Like if you're going faster than the car next to you, it looks like that car is moving backwards, even though it's not. That's the way to generally understand the optical illusion of a retrograde planet. It's not actually moving backwards, but for all intents and purposes, relative to the speed of the other planets or the speed of your life at that moment, the planet does appear to be moving backwards. And it is important, because sometimes people say, well, it's just an optical illusion and all of that. It's an optical illusion, but it's a true one. I almost fell here. Just like the example that I used. If you're on a road trip and some of the people are driving a car that is not keeping up with your car, maybe they're not moving backwards, but you can only move forward so quickly if you're with them. You're going to have to keep looking back, making sure they're keeping up with you and whatnot. So this is the kind of energy of a retrograde planet. When it's in our natal chart, then it winds up being one of these energies that we have to keep paying a lot of attention to, because it doesn't seem to keep up with the speed of our life. And so the things that they rule as what's called a karaka, a natural living karaka especially, and also as a house ruler, those things tend to back up and foul up, because that's what the planet produces. The planets produce what they rule as a karaka, and also as a house ruler. So Mercury is the karaka of, as far as living things are concerned, of friends, of distant relatives, or things like cousins, and even those kinds of friendships that, or those sorts of interactions that are based on common interest and enjoyment, and that allow you and compel you to change. So you might find friendships and what you communicate with others and things like that to be a source of confusion, but the confusion is to allow you to reflect more on that thing and develop greater skill with it. And that's the real lesson of anything, take these off, of anything that, any planet that goes retrograde. The retrograde is not, quote, bad, like, oh, it's a bad thing. It's a challenge in that it tends to disrupt the outer expression of what it rules, but that disruption then compels us to be more introspective about it, to go inward and be more grounded with it. So, for instance, let's say that Mercury rules, let's say someone is Sagittarius rising sign, and Mercury rules the 7th and the 10th houses. Then Mercury rules the partner and the career, two important angles. So those things will tend to be a little confused during the Mercury retrograde cycle. It'll allow you to reflect on what you say to your partner, what you say at your job, how flexible you are with your partner, how flexible you are in your career, how much discrimination you have with those areas of life, because that's what Mercury rules. And for all of us, though, Mercury is the common karaka and indicator of those things I just mentioned, which is, those friends and interests that we have, but also the agreements that we enter into with them, because it's as the planet of communication, it's also how shows how well we organize and manage all of the details. Like how well I can communicate in this message has to do with how well I'm able to organize all the information and then speak it. And when someone is a good communicator, they speak evenly, they don't exaggerate, one way or the other. Like if I were to just say, it'll be great, or it'll be bad. That's not good communication because there's no precision in it. You don't need a judgment. Good and bad are judgments. And that's relevant for planets like Jupiter and Mars because a judgment is something we're supposed to act on. We're supposed to act in accordance with what we know to be right and wrong or whatever. But in order to understand why it's right or wrong, we need discrimination. We need planets like Mercury to figure out, oh, this is right because when I eat this food, I get all angry and irritated and la-da-da. So it's wrong to do that. But we need to be able to break those details down, break those processes down into details so that we can first understand it in our own mind and then perhaps at some point communicate it to others. But first we need to be able to communicate it to ourselves. And this is what Mercury is. It's that voice in your head. It's very important. How important is that voice in your head? How important is the version of events based on the way you're telling it to yourself, right? Something happens and we interpret it. We turn it into a story. We connect it to language. And then that language, that story goes on in our head. You can tell someone something, but how they hear it and how they interpret it has a lot to do with Mercury. And this is a lot of what Mercury retrograde is about on a deeper metaphysical level beyond all of the, don't sign contracts and why is everything messing up and my computer's messed up. All this happens because we're not paying attention to the details. So between now and Friday, you want to, or I think it's Friday, is June 8th, you want to try to get your details in order. So our computer hard drives mess up and all that stuff happens usually because we're not taking care of the details. We don't have our files cleaned up or we don't have them backed up. That's just common sense and good practical, that's a good practical activity to get into. So it's not that the computer messes up, it's that you don't have your data backed up. You should always have that. So again, this is what, Mercury is where we learn from our past and make an adjustment and make a correction that then, improves the situation for the future. So these are all important things for the next several weeks from June 8th until July 2nd. This is the Mercury retrograde cycle. Now, it'll be in Gemini where Mercury has a lot of dignity. Mercury rules Gemini. So the dignity of the planet is incredibly important in all aspects. It's what's called the Jagratavashtas are, one of the most important ways to classify planets based on their dignity. And it classifies planets based on being awake, being kind of sleepy or dreaming, or being unconscious or asleep. And the planet that's in its own sign or exalted is said to be awake. So Mercury's going to go retrograde in Gemini, the sign where he's awake. So it's a time to really become awakened to the truth about these details. And aside from all the outer stuff, the inner details are what's important. How are you interpreting your life? What's the story you're telling yourself about what happens? You ever tell someone something and then they completely interpret it differently and bring it back to you in a way that makes no sense and even leads to like arguments and all kinds of stuff? That's a Mercury problem, of course, right? Because you communicate something, but you just then trust that they're going to hear it as well. You can say the words, but what communicates between people is much deeper than just the language. Your intention behind what you communicate to someone else, for instance, is all you can control. You can't control how they interpret it. You can just do your best to communicate it clearly, but you can, and first you have to get clear in your own head and in your own mind about whatever something means. So, Mercury is the one next to the sun. It's the one that's got the king's ear. Mercury goes out into the kingdom and goes into all the places in the kingdom. Jupiter just goes into the, proper places. Venus just goes into the nice places. Mercury goes everywhere. He goes to the church, he goes to the brothel, he goes to the, the coal mine, he goes everywhere because he wants to know what's really going on. And he's the one that reports back to the king. A good minister reports the truth to the king, not the spun version that's going to make the king feel good or the hopeful one, the truth. So are you telling yourself the truth? Or are you telling yourself some kind of distorted version of it to confirm your paranoia or to confirm that same old story that keeps, regurgitating in your head? This is going to come up in Mercury retrograde. That's the important thing, and it's a time to gain a lot of insight into it because it's going to be in Gemini where it's very powerful. So between now or between June 8th and July 2nd, that'll be a big theme. And whatever houses Mercury rules in your chart are going to be activated as well in that sense. And especially because Mercury's going to be in one of them. He's going to be going retrograde in Gemini, which is also one of the signs that he rules. So for instance, when I said Sagittarius rules, Mercury rules the 7th and 10th house for Sagittarius, Mercury will be going retrograde in the 7th house for Sagittarius because one of those signs is Gemini. That, you know, the 7th house from Sagittarius is Gemini. So very powerful time to illuminate an important part of our life with intelligence, discrimination, flexibility, humor, and really get that story straight in your head before you try to communicate it to others. So I hope this was helpful. Leave me some comments, let me know what you think, and also look for a web class on retrograde planets. I think I'll put one together. So thanks a lot. One more tour of the beautiful San Ramon ashram. Get my head out of there.